we wanted to continue the discussion of thinking forward, right? Looking at what the framework is of our world and the world that our young people are entering in the next month to 15 years, whatever makes most sense. But as we think about how to think about that, we wanted to bring in some of the voices we have not yet heard, but were referenced this morning in the discussion. So thinking about the role of government today, represented by Commissioner Bill Chong, Commissioner of the Department of Youth and Community Development. Thank you. Who will give you the exact figures, but which is an effort in the New York City budget approaching $1 billion. This is crazy and amazing and wonderful. So Bill will give you more of that, but he has overseen this incredible explosion of programming and funding for youth services. So we are delighted to have him here. Ursula Helminski is the Senior Vice President of External Affairs at the Afterschool Alliance. Afterschool Alliance is our, and I mean our, national organization that spends a lot of time thinking about both what we need as practitioners, but also how to convince Congress, certain people residing in the White House, and others that we need to have more funding for after school. And it is because of the Afterschool Alliance that 21st century funding has stayed in place in administration that has been hostile to it. So thrilled. And so she'll speak from the national perspective. And Arva Rice is president and CEO of the New York Urban League. And she really both has been on the practitioner side as well as the advocacy side. And we'll be able to bring that back to the local focus on how we're thinking about what's going on and our challenges for the future. So with that, I am delighted to invite Commissioner Bill Chong to join us.
Thank you, Allison. Let's give Allison and PASE a hand for the conference. And not just the conference, but what they do every day. When they write the history of the modern day after school system, it's easy to talk about the money and the growth and the fact that DYC's budget in this past year reached $956 million, more than twice what it was at the start of this administration. But it's more than money. The secret sauce is what they do behind the scenes, building strong programs, building strong organizations, giving the staff the skills. Because without that, we won't be impactful. So let's give them a hand. I was telling Allison that, it's funny, this place has a lot of memories for me. So this, I've said to people, is the birthplace of the modern day after school system. So in October 29th, 2003, there was a gathering of nonprofit executives and government people to plan this new after-school system called out-of-school time. Now, by show of hands, who was there? Okay, we're all old. And, I thought, with today's theme, we're talking about framing the future, as someone who's been an activist, government person for almost 40 years, I've learned that you really can't chart the future without understanding the past and the foundations that things are built on today. So I thought I'd spend some time talking about what came out of that planning meeting 16 years ago, and what were the things that were built and that we're still building on today. Things that don't get New York Times headlines, but are important. And let me just say that I have to give credit to 4 women who were the mothers of the modern day after school system. My predecessor, Jean Mulgrave, Esther Fuchs, who was an advisor to Mayor Bloomberg, who now teaches at Columbia, and 2 women at the Wallace Foundation, Nancy Devine and Dara Rose, who helped guide the creation of this infrastructure and this scaffolding. So let me talk about the 4 pillars that I think we've built everything on, that we take for granted, but I think, I'll talk about how things were different before we did them. One is data collection and online data system. We take it for granted now, but back then, before we had what was then OST Online and then DYCD Online, the way we would track attendance in after-school programs, and I testified before the City Council before our late Lou Filler, because people were upset about this new system and all the data entry required. The way we used to do this, every day, and there were many fewer after-school programs around the city, people would have to fax the attendance sheets for their programs to someone at DYCD whose job was to do an aggregate count and put it in an Excel spreadsheet. Truth. Now we know who's attending, what they're attending, which programs are struggling, which ones are succeeding. That was the world before we had an online data system. The second pillar was evaluation. Wallace Foundation gave us our first initial funding to do evaluations so we can see whether the system works. And through that, back then we didn't know. We would just do individual site visits and we kind of determine whether a program was okay or not. But we didn't have a way to measure whether the strategy we were investing in was working. And as a result of that evaluation now, in the Sonic evaluation we did in 2014, one of the things we learned early on, which has guided us the last 5 years, is the lack of youth voice. We did an evaluation. We found out there was a disconnect. The young people said there is no youth voice. The staff of the nonprofit said there was a youth voice. And so we realized that we need to pay more and more attention. So for those of you who are working in the trenches, you realize that we have really put a huge investment on youth voice, civic engagement, making sure young people have a voice in what the programs deliver and how they can help use these as platforms for social change. The third thing third pillar was capacity building and professional development. I started my first job here, and I'll kind of tell a story here. So October 29th, 2003, I started October 14th, 2003. I was the Assistant Commissioner for Capacity Building. First city agency to have that position, and the first time there was a concerted effort to have capacity building for our programs. And my job was, I've been here 2 weeks, 15 days. I think I was sitting right there, and I was a timekeeper. Because I've been here 15 days, right? So my job was to put up the stop sign and 5 minutes, 3 minutes. So, and so Dennis Walcott, Deputy Mayor Dennis Walcott, gave him the 3-minute notice, then the 1-minute notice, and the stop sign. He stopped. On cue, I said, wow, that's real power. Stop sign, got Deputy Mayor to stop. And he stopped at a natural point. Someone else I won't mention went through 4 stop signs. But I say that to say that we started with a small investment in capacity building, and now we've brought on PASE and so many other providers to help, because we know that without their efforts, we won't have impact. And so we've gone from just simply doing professional development and individual skills to really looking at how we can build strong organizations. And so one of the things we're looking at is that we have grown 115% in the last 5 years. And we're looking at the 30 organizations that we fund that have grown at 115%. Because more money is a double-edged sword. And Sister Paulette, I like to quote Sister Paulette. Is anyone here from Good Shepherds? No? Oh, okay. Sister Paulette says, for every government dollar you have to raise, there's a cost associated with it. And she's right. So we want to make sure that as we build out programs and expand the number of programs, we're building up the infrastructure and the scaffolding that each nonprofit has so they can manage the growth. Because, simple things that we take for granted. If you don't have a strong fiscal staff and department and people don't get paid, well, guess what? There's no services. So, that's why, we're shifting a little bit from just looking at individual programs and the frontline staff, but to looking at the holistic approach to the organizations that we're funding, especially the big stakeholders, what we call the top 30. And the last thing was creating a pipeline for future leaders. So one of the things we did with the Wallace Foundation money is we seeded something called the Youth Studies Certificate Program at the City University of New York. It was the first time. What? Any graduates of that program? Okay. Well, but it was intended to be a way to create a pipeline for new leaders into the field. And for the first time, there was a 12-credit program at CUNY, and they added, I think, a 6-credit master's program. So we created this pipeline for CUNY students who want to go into the field of youth work, because there is no path. It's not like social work, it's not like nursing, it's not like teaching. So we started that pipeline, but one of the things that we didn't do is we didn't reconnect the pipeline. And so one of the unintended consequences of this exceptional growth in all our programs, but particularly after-school programs, is the staffing challenges. We have heard from many of you that it's hard to fill positions. And so I know Tracy Cauldron, our assistant commissioner for Compass, is trying to figure out different strategies. We started a partner with the Actors Fund, where they have people who are looking to do career transitions. We've piloted some programs with CUNY, to create this pipeline. And again, we understand that for this system to maintain itself and to grow, we need new blood. So I want to end on those notes, because those are the 4 pillars that we take for granted. Because one of the fortunate things or unfortunate things of being at DYC, this is my 14th year. So I did 8 years under the Bloomberg administration. This is my 6th year under this mayor, is I've seen growth, contraction, and growth. And so I know that good times can turn to bad times very quickly. So the most important thing for us is to build this scaffolding, this infrastructure, so no matter how big our budget is, whether it's $400 million, $956 million, or $1 billion, that we can be impactful. And you can't be impactful without this infrastructure. So thank you again, and I'll be here to answer some questions later.
Wow, that's a tough one to follow. I think New York City having almost $1 billion is incredible. I want to thank you for having me today. I'm happy to be here with you. I want to thank PASE for all that you do and for all of the work that you guys do every day with programs and with young people. It's what keeps us at the Afterschool Alliance motivated. And so as Allison mentioned, we at the Afterschool Alliance are working to expand after-school programs nationwide. So we focus our work on helping to make sure that programs like yours have the resources to provide high-quality programs, and we work to make sure that as many kids as possible can participate in programs like yours. So I'm just going to touch on some of the things we do. We gather and distill research on the impact of after-school and summer programs that we use and that you can use in making the case for funding for after-school. We advocate directly for policies that support after-school and summer programs. We help the field advocate and build support locally for programs. So we have things like fact sheets, issue briefs that connect after-school to lots of different hot topics, funding, policy, and research updates galore. And these are all on our website, afterschoolalliance.org. If you're not signed up for our updates, I encourage you to sign up for those and stay abreast of those things. As you mentioned as well, we're probably best known for working on 21st Century Community Learning Centers funding. Does everyone know what that is? 21st Century Community Learning Centers is the only dedicated federal funding source for after-school and summer programs. It's about $1 billion. That money goes, about $90 million goes to New York State, which is then granted out to local after-school and summer programs around the state. We're also known probably for Lights On After School. Anybody here know Lights On After School? This is my baby, so I need to see like hands. All right, so Lights On After School is a nationwide rally for after-school programs. This year, it's October 24th. We really just try and create a platform for all programs everywhere to open your doors, show the community what you're doing, bring in elected officials, really let after-school programs shine. And before I get into the deep, dark status of national policy, a little bright spot. So we do have the Empire State Building lighting up again for Lights On After School this fall. And you guys are the first people to officially know that SpongeBob is going to be on hand to help light the Empire State Building for after-school programs. So please join us in that celebration. So I was asked to say a little bit about the national landscape, and our perspective is policy, so I'm going to sort of focus there. So I want to spend just a minute before looking ahead on the current climate in DC and national politics. As you can imagine, it's rough. It's partisan, it's chaotic. The environment in DC is sort of unrelenting chaos. After school and education overall have been pretty much under attack by the administration. The president's first action on after school was a doozy, so we were surprised to find that he had called for eliminating all 21st century funding, all that $1 billion, in his first proposed budget coming into office. In fiscal year 2019, the next year, the administration again called for eliminating all after-school funding. In 2020, the administration called again for eliminating all after-school funding. I think we know what's coming in 2021. And then at the program level, and I think this has come up in a lot of the conversations that you're having, there have been a lot of policies that have hurt our communities deeply. And after-school programs are struggling to help communities experiencing the trauma of family separation, of increases in hate speech and divisiveness, the horror of gun violence. And those are real, and those policies are having, I know, real implications for all of you in this room and the communities you serve. But in the face of all of this, we have a lot to be proud of. So I'm going to do my School of Rock legislative lesson. So when the president proposes a budget, he actually doesn't have the power to enforce that budget. That's in the hands of Congress. So Congress can accept or reject those budget proposals. They write the bills that appropriate funds. And Congress did not accept elimination of after-school programs. So not only did we not get eliminated, we got a $20 million increase in 2018, a $10 million increase in 2019. And these are things we beat back, not because I'm here, but because of you, because communities spoke out, because programs had leaders come and see the amazing work that they're doing. It's something we won because of the decades of hard work that everyone's been doing and the systems that you've been building for so long in supporting kids and families. So, and it's not just Republicans. I know that New York City, we always think we've already got the champions. We need to thank them. We need to remind them. We need everybody to know consistently and continually how important these programs are and the impact that you're making. So, snapshot of today, fiscal year 2020 is still up in the air. Amazingly, the House has passed a bill that would include a $100 million increase for 21st century programs for local after-school and summer programs. That would bring funding to a high of $1.3 billion, so slightly above New York City's. But that would bring funding for New York State grants for local programs up to about $98 million, which is significant. There was a budget deal. I don't know if you guys were following the politics this week. So we were facing some automatic and very severe budget cuts nationally and the threat of more government shutdowns. If this budget deal that was put together in the last couple of days sticks, I think we're free of that threat of those for the next couple of years. And it might mean that we actually see some of this $100 million increase. The House, as you know, is Democratic controlled and the Senate is Republican, so there'll be some negotiations there. But it's significant. So I'm going to do my second shameless plug after my lights on one, which is you might have heard from the After School Alliance directly, or you might have heard from the Campaign for Children or from other organizations sharing the news to take a minute to call or email Congress or to involve your local elected officials in your program. Just respond to those. Take a minute. It really makes a difference. And it's been the grassroots outreach that has saved after-school funding these past 3 years. And we can't relent. We have to keep it up. There are a lot of other pieces of legislation in play right now, and it's too much to go into all of them, but 3 maybe big ones. One is that childcare funding, the funding for the Childcare Development Block Grant has actually been increasing also. So we're working to try and make sure that as those who work with school-age kids also see that increase. Workforce development, so you heard a lot of the comments this morning about a real focus on the skills that kids need all the way from elementary through high school. This is something that's really big in federal policy and local and state. And so there's a lot of opportunities, I think, to look for maybe new funding or pieces of legislation on that topic. But specifically, the Perkins Career and Technical Education Law was reauthorized, and that's a fancy way of saying states are now creating new CTE plans. So there's a big opportunity for after school to be at the table there and really rethinking what these systems for CTE and apprenticeships and internships really look like, and there's an opportunity for after school to be at that table. So that's something happening right now in New York. And finally, we're working hard to try and lower the threshold for programs for low-income communities to access child nutrition funds. So making it easier and for more programs to get snacks and healthy meals and that stuff. So I have like 2 sort of last areas I wanted to touch on in looking ahead. 2 are emerging policy opportunities, and 2 are sort of 2 big things looming ahead. So for the 2 policy opportunities, these are, I guess, a little bit bittersweet for me, but again, both at the federal level and in the state and local level, there's a lot of interest in looking at trauma-informed approaches, addressing the opioid epidemic, addressing the challenges that you guys are seeing in programs every day. There are opportunities to broaden and increase support for the role of after-school and summer learning around those topics. For example, in Alaska, they actually won after-school funding. They attached it to the marijuana tax, so they passed that bill. And some of that funds support after-school programs that engage young people in skill building to aid in the prevention of substance misuse. So I know that's sort of a lot of conflicts maybe in there, but your own New York network, the Network for Youth Success, actually had something like that drafted in the legislation for New York State, and that didn't pass. But it's staying on top of these things is really important and presents some big opportunities. The other trend that we're seeing is that there's more traction around the things that you guys have been doing for a really long time. Thinking about social emotional learning, the science of learning, the concept of whole child. Policymakers are still way behind where you are. They're way behind where the public mindset is, which is not wanting to think about like test taking and test prep and all of that stuff. But there is more happening, and there's more of an awareness of thinking differently, I think, about education and learning. And again, that same House bill that had $100 million increase for after school also had $260 million for SEL initiatives that were just new money. So this is, again, significant. And we might see more of this happening around the country. So I think those 2 fronts will be big issues for programs and policy in the coming years ahead. There are 2 more big things looming ahead. So one is the census, which I was happy to hear raised this morning. So again, I think there's a lot of concern that our families and youth will be undercounted in that, and that the effect of them being undercounted will be less resources to help those families, communities, and kids. So we need to figure out how to make sure people participate in the census. The other big one coming is the elections, and everybody's like, yes, elections. Every member of the House of Representatives, 1/3 of U.S. senators, of course the president, and 11 governors face elections in 2020. And in 2021, New York City has a huge election season coming up. The mayor, the most of the city council, all the borough presidents, this is huge. So one, we need to get out the vote, right, in our communities. But two, we need to let candidates know that after school and summer are important. And we need to educate all those people when they come into office about the importance of these programs all over again. On that last note, we are releasing in fall of 2020 a new installment of the America After 3 p.m. report. Does anyone know the statistic for every child in a program, 2 are waiting to get in, or 11 million kids are on their own after school? We do a study every 5 years that sort of assesses the landscape of how many kids are in programs and how many are not, what parents want out of programs, what they see their kids benefiting from in after-school programs. So we have a new report on that coming out in fall of 2020, which will be very helpful, I think, in educating our leaders, our cities, our states, our federal leaders about the need for after-school programs and what parents are really valuing in those programs. So that's my whole package for you. I want to leave you with what I hope is a positive note, because it's tough out there. So we've made a difference. You've made a difference in really difficult times. And I think we can continue to do so. We just have to share the amazing and challenging work that you're doing every day to support young people. Thank you.
I'll come up for just another second. Thank you both, Bill and Ursula, extraordinarily helpful. And we will have time for questions after our next speaker, who is Arva Rice. And just because she wasn't able to hear, I want to say we love Arva Rice, awesome colleague. She is president and CEO of the New York Urban League and is also a past practitioner. Known Arva through the years at many, many different things. Her bio is in your program, and she has been around a lot of different aspects of what matters to families and children in the city of New York, and I'm delighted to welcome her here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you for that nice way of saying Arva was late, so we got to reintroduce her. I'm so sorry, but the train was running a little bit late. But I cannot tell you how excited I am to be. I feel back in a room with my people. As Allison mentioned, I started out working in the after-school space, working directly with young people. And here in my third role as an executive director, I run a civil rights organization. So a lot of times I'm talking to corporate people, trying to convince them about the value and promise of diversity. I'm talking to young professionals who are battling, working in either nonprofit or corporate spaces. I'm trying to maintain their identity and to bring their full selves to work. But it's exciting to be back in a room full of nonprofit folks. So thank you so much for this invitation, and thank you, Allison, for your leadership and the work that you have done with PASE. I think it's absolutely amazing. So I don't want to take a lot of time with you all because I know that you just ate. And I know how that impacts some of y'all. So we're gonna move through what I have to say with you all today. Allison asked me to talk a little bit about the trends in the nonprofit sector. And when she said that, I thought that she would mean the trends around diversity because I'm a black girl. So I figured that might be something that she wanted me to touch on today. So I looked for some statistics, some data, some research that would just blow you away. That would be something that you never heard before, that's something that had never occurred to you before. And I tell you, I had a really hard time. Because one of the things I found out was that 80% of nonprofits are led by white folks. 80% of nonprofits are led by white people. Well, you all walk into your executive director's office, so this is not news to you, right? You know, some of you all have friends that work in the nonprofit sector. This is not news to you. Some of you even may watch Insecure, right? Issa Rae. This is not news to you all, right? And so then I started to look a little bit deeper, and then I saw that if you look at the top 300 institutions, the top 300 nonprofits in the city, that actually goes to 90%. But like I said, once again, this is not a surprise to us that those nonprofit organizations where when you open up the file cabinet, the paper's always there, and they always have staplers, right? Those organizations are led by those folks who may not look like the people in this room. Then I started to think about the board of directors. Certainly I'll find some statistic on the board of directors that is just, shocking and just revolutionary for all of us. And I found that 14% of boards of directors 14% of the folks around boards of directors are African Americans, Latino, Asian, look like some of the folks that are in this room that represent a lot of the communities that we serve. Just 14%. Shocking, not that shocking, right? That is not huge news. So I thought, well, let me look in a little bit further, and I started to look at the number and the shift that's about to happen as many of the folks that we grew up and admired who have served as our supervisors. Because like I said, white folks working in nonprofit organizations do a lot of good things, right? So these are people that we've admired and respected, done really great things, and now they're starting to retire. And so we're going to see a huge shift in the leadership of nonprofit organizations. The challenge, though, is that the trend has shown that even as those people shift, the chances are that if your name is Shakita, Marcus, or Emmanuel, the chances of you getting those positions are going to be less, right? The fact is that the numbers of people of color that are going to naturally slide into those leadership positions is not that strong, right? And so I said to myself, I'm supposed to be some type of inspiration as you go into the rest of the afternoon. But these trends that I'm telling you aren't exactly that they're neither surprising nor are they inspirational. So I thought rather than talking about the trends, I'm going to share with you all a couple of truths. So a couple of truths that I've experienced in my leadership journey. As you all heard, I started out working on the nonprofit sector, and I've worked as the founding director of a nonprofit organization. I replaced a founding executive director of a nonprofit organization, and I now lead an organization that's about to be 100 years old. So I've had very different kind of leadership experiences, one where I was responsible for selecting every single thing, the tables, the chairs, the curriculum, every staff person as the founding executive director. Then I came to a place and they said, wow, you're wanting to change things from the founding executive director. Are you sure? We always did it this way with that person. How can we do it? And then I got to the third place and they said, don't even look at the furniture. Don't even look at anything because this is something that is shrined in history and legacy. But so as a part of being in those three different organizational spaces, I wanted to share with you three short truths about this journey that I hope will inspire you all to continue doing this great work. First of all, you may not be called, but you are chosen. You may not be called, but you are chosen. You're chosen because you're sitting in the seats today, the work that you do in your nonprofit organizations, the young people that you are leading the way for and providing and creating opportunity, you are already chosen. As I mentioned, the very first nonprofit that I led, I was the founding executive director. I worked for an organization called Public Allies. And or as we used to say, Public Allies. But when I went to work at Public Allies, I went in for my first initial interview, and they told me about how they had done this feasibility study. And in the process of doing this feasibility study, they went and they talked to a number of different existing nonprofit organizations. And they said, you know what, we're looking for our founding executive director. Can you make a recommendations? And so they told me the names of all these different nonprofit people that they had spoken to. They talked to people in foundations. They spoke to individuals, and none of them suggested me. Now, was I offended by that? Of course I was. I was all in my feelings. I couldn't believe it. I said, nobody mentioned me? I couldn't believe it. But the fact is I went through the interview process, was selected for it, and really had a wonderful experience serving as the founding executive director of Public Allies. But the fact is that some people will not see the potential in you, but you're going to have to put yourself out there anyway. Because that was my first time being an executive director. So people had seen me as a program director, they'd seen me as a fundraising person, but they couldn't see me as an executive director yet. But clearly, that was my calling, right? Clearly, it was something that I was supposed to be doing. So even though I didn't receive a call to apply for that position, clearly I was chosen to do it. And I still run into people, and actually a good number of my staff members are graduates of Public Allies. And so I was chosen to be there, even though sometimes people don't always recognize our potential. The second thing that I wanted to leave you all with is that anyone that you admire has cried themselves to sleep at night. Anyone that you admire has cried themselves to sleep at night. And that was a hard truth for me to understand because, working in the nonprofit sector, I saw a lot of people who supervised me who, I was like, I'm not sure why this person is supervising me. They don't know nothing more than I do. I'm not sure what's going on with them. These decisions that they're making, what are they doing? And then I became the person on the other side having to make those decisions. And one of the most concrete ways I think about that is I look at payroll when it's time for paychecks to come out. I look at that very differently than I did when I was working in the other space, right? So usually your check comes, yay, woo, you decide what you're gonna do, pay your rent, go out, hang out with your friends, all those sorts of things. But when you're in leadership, you're responsible for making sure that the money's in the account, right? So you got to make sure that either the credit line is drawn down, the money came in on time, you got all your vouchers into DYCD in a timely manner so that they can get that money to you. So you have a different level of responsibility. And so you're looking at that in different ways. And all of that worry, that stress can cause people to lose a little bit of sleep, right? It causes you to be a little bit stressed. And it happens for you all too, whether it's something that you're concerned about, the young people in your programming, but anybody that you truly admire has had to work hard, and made those mistakes along the way that maybe has caused a tear or two. But I also want you to remember that the only people that don't make mistakes are people that aren't doing anything. So forgive yourselves. Forgive yourselves for those mistakes that you make along the way. They're going to happen, but we have to forgive ourselves for those. Absolutely. And the last thing that I wanted to leave you all with, I wish it was my song, something that I made up, but it's time for us all to level up. It's time to level up. Yes, indeed. It's time to take a class. I mentioned that my first role to be an executive director was at Public Allies. I literally went out with my friends. I was turning 30. And I said, what do I want to do that's going to be impactful and interesting and fabulous? And I said, I want to be the executive director of a nonprofit organization. How cool would that be? That would be fantastic. For the next couple of years, I could do that. And so my girlfriends looked at me and they said, well, what you doing next weekend? What you doing the month after that? What's keeping you from doing that? And so I did a list of things that would keep me, or that the talents and skills I didn't feel like that I had yet in order to become an executive director. And so I took a class on accounting for non-accountants. And I started to speak to executive directors and said, what are some of the things that they think that you need to have in place in order to become an executive director? It was a time when I decided that it was time for me to level up. And I encourage you all to think about that as well. If you do not already have a mentor, it is time for you all to get a mentor. Is there somebody in your, yes, and mentorship is not only for the young people in your programs, it's for you and it's for those who are supervising above you, right? Because if we're gonna level up, we need to make sure we know what the next level looks like. And I wanna let you all know that, don't ask me to be your mentor. Don't ask me. Ain't nobody got time for that, right? But, wait. But if you send me an email and you ask me to make a connection for you, I'll respond, right? If you ask me, what are the sort of events that you're going to? I'm going to events all the time. Can I go to an event with you, Ms. Rice? You know what? I'll probably say you can go to an event with me. If you say to me, can I have a coffee? I'll probably have that coffee with you. And you know what? Next thing you know, y'all gonna be out telling people that I'm your mentor anyway. So the key is, if there's somebody that you're having conversation with, there's somebody that you see that's doing something interesting, if you ask them to be your mentor, it's probably going to seem really daunting to them. They're going to say, oh, I don't have enough time, I can't put that on my list. If you ask the commissioner, he's going to say, you know what, we fund a lot of different nonprofits through the city. I can't just talk to you, I know all these different nonprofits. And then you might say to him, well, could you come and you speak to my nonprofit? And he might say, well, I don't know if I can do that. But if you went to Allison and said, Allison, could you do a conversation with the commissioner so that all of us could kind of hear him talk, that might be something that he might be willing to do. And then he might become something that a friend of mine used to say to me all the time. Now we're actually friends, but she said, for a long time, Arva, you were my best friend in my head. And so, and I was like, well, that's interesting. But there's people that you take the things that they've talked about, some of the tidbits that they've written, whether it's an article that they've written or something that they talked about, and that becomes little pieces of mentoring advice that you have, whether you're there directly in your life or not. But I encourage you to find a mentor and define it as loosely and as tightly as you can. The other thing about leveling up is I want you to be bold. I want you to be bold. Leadership is about doing things that make your stomach hurt. So you all need to think about what are some of the projects and activities, some of the things that you're doing at your nonprofit organization that you're hearing about, but you may not have been invited to the table. Invite yourself. Get your own table, get your own folding chair, pull it up to the table, right? That's what Shirley Chisholm used to talk about, right? And so it's important for you all to be bold, to put yourselves out there, and to take on an additional task, because the fact is that you're never going to be able to level up unless you do something different than you've already done, right? So be bold and take on something that you haven't done before. And the last thing I'll ask you to do is to get out there and to push yourself out there. This is one example of ways in which you can connect with other nonprofit leaders and other people who are looking to do more. But I encourage you all to attend a networking event in your area or in your field or your space. I encourage you all to subscribe to a service, whether it's in Education Week or whether it's another type of publication, but make sure that you're always reading up and finding out about trends. The politics of today, as you heard from Ursula, and you know because you're walking around in it, are like nothing, at least our generation has seen before. I know for my mama, she's just like, child, please. But for our generation, this is crazy, right? So this what we're going through leaves us at an opportunity where activism isn't just for activists. Activism has to be for every single one of us. And so in order for us to be able to be up to the challenge, we must level up, we've got to level up, and we've got to level up. Thank you so very much for listening.
Thank you so very much. Maybe late, but she is on it. Thank you. Appreciate it, Arva. Totally all over it. Really appreciate it. We have time for probably just a couple of questions, if anyone has for any one of the three of the panelists. Yes, sir. Well, you could project, or we can turn it on.
People's equipment.
Go ahead, Dallas.
It's on. Ooh.
Yep.
Let me stand back. It's on. Thank you, distinguished panelists, for everything that you shared. And I'm going to indulge by saying salutes for 100 years of the flagship affiliate of the National Urban League system, the New York Urban League. And I'm just going to appeal to Madam President Arva R. Rice to share with us her public allies Michelle Obama story, please.
This is the problem when you know too many people. This is a sin and a shame. This is a sin and a shame. All right, I'm gonna tell you the short version of the story. So, and you already know the ending, so it's not gonna, so I can tell it more quickly. So I came to work at Public Allies, as I've mentioned a couple times already in this conversation, and I got a phone call from one of the leaders within Public Allies, and he said, "We want you to meet this woman. We think she'd be really terrific. Actually, you know what? Matter of fact, you all remind us of each other, and so I think you should get to know her." And I said, "I'm not really interested." And so then they called me back. And a little bit later, they're like, "No, seriously, Arva, you should really meet this woman. She's fantastic. I think you guys would really get along." And I said, "Okay, well, who is she?" And they're like, "Well, she ran Public Allies in Chicago, and she's just really terrific, and I think you all will get along, and you could learn a lot from her." I could learn a lot from her. What you mean? Because I don't know anything? So I didn't call her back. Once again, I didn't call her back. So then I went to a conference with the same group of people, and they said, "Oh my goodness, we can't believe you haven't met her. She's fantastic." And I said, "Okay, well, tell me about her." Well, her husband works in politics, and he's going to run for higher office. So she quit her job in order to support. She quit her job to support her husband. I am not calling that woman. Are you kidding me? And then they're just like, I'm like, "Okay, well, tell me what her name is." And they're like, "Michelle Obama." And I'm like, "Michelle Obama?" And I'm like, and they kept saying it faster and faster, like, "Michelle Obama, Michelle." And I was like, I don't even know what that is. What's a Michelle Obama? And I never called her, ladies and gentlemen. So as you all know, it was Michelle Obama who was running the Public Allies in Chicago. She had left a couple years before I came on. And so I didn't connect with her at that time. And usually when I tell that story is to tell people to not block their blessings. Because for me, I became so insecure about what it was that I wasn't that I never reached out to her. And to this day, I actually haven't personally one-on-one met Michelle Obama, but when I do, I'm going to tell her that story. So thank you.
one more. All right, please join me in thanking our amazing speakers. And as a mini reminder, we have a commissioner who listens. You heard that in his remarks. He listens and pays attention and hears when we have pain points and when we're thinking about this. So as we continue through this administration, and certainly as we prepare for whatever comes next, let's keep in mind that we need to speak, we need to have our voices heard, and we have somebody who will listen to us, and that matters. Ursula, through Afterschool Alliance and often PASE, but certainly the New York State, New York Network for Youth Success, often needs things like signatures, amazing programs to visit, and examples of when things go really right, and we've all had the days when they don't, but when they do. So we can help Ursula keep that money flowing to after school, both for ourselves in this city and state, but also for the country. And Arva, you're just completely and totally awesome, and she has an amazing set of resources and an amazing program, and is also part of the technical assistance providers, which has the name of the Nonprofit Stabilization Fund. So when it's time, PACE sends it out, you'll get it, but offers amazing technical assistance and support for our capacity building, which, going back to the commissioner, is enormously important for us to have effective programs. So I am going to turn it over to Tanya Ortiz Ashby in just one second, but one more time, thank you for our speakers. Extraordinary. No, come on up.